Okay, so I thank you for being present here, to you who are present here. So today is the birthday of Anne Lacaton, but not the birthday of her partner Vassal. Anyway, it's her birthday. Let's wish her happy birthday and congratulations for for the work they do. And let's see. Let's look at the work. These are the people, the happy Pritzker laureates. I understood they both studied architecture, I think, in Bordeaux, and then, well, he went to Africa, to Niger, to work there for a while as an urbanist, and she pursued studies for a master, and then I guess they were in love. Let's put it this way. And she flew to Africa, and then they returned. Anyway, it's a love story. That's what it is. But it's a love story not only between two people, two architects in this case, but also a love story towards architecture, because they are architects and they try their best to build as they feel appropriate. Anne Lacaton. So happy birthday to you, Anne. She was actually in Bucharest a few years ago. I think she gave a talk at the Teatro Național. Anyway, here they are again with their beloved plants behind them. You know, their architecture was praised for being a modest architecture. And in a certain way, it is true, but I don't know if it is totally true. And I'll try to articulate what I think in relation with their work. Yeah, in 2021, so they just got the Pritzker. In 2019, actually, it was Arata Isozaki, and I think in 2020 was Doshi, no? The Indian architect. So my question to the people here is, when a Romanian who will win the Pritzker? Not that it's so important, the prize in itself, but it's about arriving at a certain level of excellence and originality. And you can tell, looking at these people, that they are, serious people. You look at the expression of Mr. Vassal, and you also look at the expression of Anne Lacaton. You know, they work hard, and they were not, in a way, the winning of the Pritzker by them shows a new trend that it happened for a few years, well, with the exception really of Arata Isozaki, but the jury of the Pritzker seems to advocate rewarding works which are not necessarily associated with spectacular or theatrical stardom. So Anne Lacaton and Vassal, here they are younger people, and they do look like architects somehow. Anyway, we start with a building from 1993, Maison La Tapie in Floirac. And there is a continuity in the work. The work done, 28 years ago is very similar to what they do now. This work was very published and is a famous modest house. I hesitated to use the word villa. Personally, I have a problem with this architecture, because I see in most of their works, they seem to be very fond of greenhouses. Now, greenhouses are made for plants. They are not made for human beings. And I personally don't know, I don't have the experience living inside a greenhouse. So I can only imagine certain things, but in my opinion, it cannot be very, very comfortable to have so much glass around you. It's not just the temperature, but also the humidity. In the summer, it's hot, and in the winter, it's cold. And the humidity, which is, a good thing for plants, is not a good thing for human beings. So, and I see in many of their works, if not all of their works, this almost an obsession with the greenhouse. And that we'll move forward about this. Also, if I look at this picture, I see a strange contradiction. Two doors that open, like in this case, and then you have the X that blocks your way. So, it confuses me, because a door that is open should mean you can pass through, but not in this case, unless, of course, you go around the two diagonals. So, conceptually speaking, this is very, very strange. Why would they? Because I don't think structurally that X was needed, because on the right, there isn't any X. So I don't know, in my opinion, I'm tempted to speculate that there is a certain ambivalence within them. On one hand, towards openness, a liking of openness, and on the other hand, maybe even a touch of introversion or even misanthropy, although I don't like to think in these terms. But you see, on the right, it makes sense. You open the doors and you can go through. But here, you would say, we only open the doors in order to let the air in. Of course, you need the air in, because otherwise you will succumb in this greenhouse. The greenhouse, to me, is very, very problematic. Yes, it looks nice because it's a lot of light, and you think you are connected with the exterior, with the sky and everything. But the truth is, you are trapped within a glass cage, bigger or smaller. And I don't think this is so to be envied. There are interesting things here, and the paradox almost is, if you remove the old furniture and all these objects that belong to this family life, you get a ghost house. It is the old furniture, and there are the old objects which give reality and substance and even heaviness to what we look at. This is also true in the case of some architecture by Ishigami, especially his earlier works. The building is very rarefied, even anemic, and thanks to old furniture, it gains some weight and some reality in a way. It's the same true in the case of Lacaton and Vassal. These objects that give reality and substance and meaning to lived life do not belong actually to the building, belong to the owners of this place. Without them, I like very much these pictures. I like what I see because I see life here. But if I remove these things, I only look at the building, I'm not impressed, because the building is very sketchy and very ghost-like. Now, maybe this was their intention, to create a background, a gray, rarefied architectural background against which life to manifest itself in full force. I could understand that, but what I cannot understand is, why should modesty be gray? There is so much grayness in their architecture that at one moment in the process of preparing this material, I got tired. I got very, very tired. It was just too much metal and too much grayness. I'm so happy that there is this tablecloth here, but which does not belong to Lacaton and Vassal, belongs to the people who live here. I will show also a project or two where the diagrams they make are very colored and colorful, but the building is again deadly gray. And to me, grayness is not truly an image of modesty. You know, I mean, I could understand philosophically, so to speak, you know, certain virtues of grayness, but life cannot be gray, and it shouldn't be gray, in my opinion. Again, we look here at things. What attracts us is exactly what is not gray. You know, the wood, the lamp, all these things that belong to lived life, which is not sketchy, it's not diagrammatical. There is something else, and not just in this work. By creating the greenhouse, the conventional room, so to speak, recede in the back. So there is light in the greenhouse, but less and less within the rooms which are distanced from the facade of the building and thus the exterior. Now, maybe the feeling is not unpleasant, maybe something approximating a cave-like, you know, darkness. It's possible. Otherwise, the architectural language is that of rationalism. Let's face it. I mean, you know, if you believe in rationalism, then you believe in this kind of architecture. But if you want a house to be engaging and provocative and to entice you, then I don't know. We can talk about it. In my opinion, this house could give the impression that it is a modest architecture, but living within a greenhouse, and in my opinion, also perhaps needing some air conditioning. I mean, yes, you open the doors and so on, but you know, an hourglass. I never lived in an hourglass, not an hourglass, sorry, greenhouse. I never lived in a greenhouse, but I imagine, and I also read that the difference in temperatures is you know, very, very hard to take, because in the summer it's very hot and in the winter it's very cold, and also the humidity is a problem. So you wonder, is this truly a modest architecture? On the other hand, I like what I see here, but I'm still bothered by these axes here. You know, they are not massive, it's true, but I see them, I perceive them, and I'm sure you perceive them too. And I don't know, they make me uncomfortable, because it's not really about being open. You know, it's this X here is telling you, you know, there is a barrier here, there is a threshold here, and you cannot pass through it or over it at your convenience. Otherwise, yes, the space is kind of interesting, but why do you think this was placed here? You know, well, this rhetorical height, you know, it is rhetorical. I mean, if it was not needed to be so high, why did they make it so high? And, you know, these windows, if they open towards still an interior space, not an exterior space. So in my opinion, the house itself, you know, this part is estranged from the outside even more, except that, yes, you have this big glass covered space, you know, this greenhouse in front of it. But is this a veranda? Not really. It's an enclosed space that now they open these windows, these doors here. But otherwise, this is an enclosed space with glass, it's true. In my opinion, it could be suffocating. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I didn't live in such a space. But to me, this is not really a modest house. It gives the impression of modesty, but I don't really think it's a modest house. On the other hand, I like very much the disorder of and also the unpretentiousness of the furniture. This I like very much. And this has to do, I imagine, mostly with what the owners of the house acquired and had. But maybe it was also because there is an informal aspect to the design of the house. This is almost like a garage sale, it's also, it gives you the feeling as if you are living in a garage somehow. I mean, if you open these doors and it's getting dark there and so on, there are aspects of what I see here that I like. This informality, all kinds of furniture and islands of interest of, it's atypical to have, so-called famous house in this way. This aspect I do like. As for the plan, this is very typical of them, to divide the house in two parts. This is the greenhouse and this is the house. Well, they together form the house, but there are two separate, two different kinds of spaces. And they do it even in public buildings with this duality of different arrangements. On the other hand, if I look at this island of, the kitchen and the bathroom and the stair, again, this to me is not a modest architectural gesture. Because if it was to be modest, you'd have placed the bathroom to have a window, and not to depend on vertical artificial ventilation. So this kind of arrangement is mimicking certain international style architecture, certain, luxurious actually architectures from Mies van der Rohe and Philip Johnson, the glass house and so on. But again, this is not modest architecture. This to me, if you want to do a modest architecture, you give a window to the kitchen and you give a window to the bathroom and you don't rely on artificial ventilation. To me, this is actually contradicting the idea that this is a modest house. It's not a modest house. They just needed a, kind of a so-called clean plan, where with circulation around it. But this circulation around this island of, basic needs in the house has problems. For example, just like in the Farnsworth house by Mies van der Rohe, if you cook, if you are in front of the stove or in front of the sink, you turn your back on light. So this is, in my opinion, very, very immodest and very unpleasant to work with, to have your own shadow thrown on the counter of the kitchen. You work with your back to the window. Here, this unpleasantness is even amplified by the fact that this is actually this wall is only apparently an exterior wall, because this space, the greenhouse, doubles the space of the house. So this is also, in a way, the interior of the house. So, in my opinion, and I'm not a functionalist, this is not a house that is very modest, and it's not a house that actually functions very well, in my opinion. Even if I'm sure in France, artificial ventilation can be provided, or mechanical ventilation can be provided in, I imagine, decent conditions, but still, anyway, these are some thoughts I had about this house. which appears to be modest, but is not actually, because if you look even at this picture on the right corner, that greenhouse is quite rhetorical, quite big, you know. I mean, imagine removing it. Well, then the facade of the building would be here, and actually the relationship with the exterior will be no more natural and more, I would say, more beneficial. On the other hand, if I look at these facades, there is something that I like here, you know, this, it's almost a lyrical strictness, if I am to use such words. It's modular, and it makes me think a little bit of Japanese architecture. It has qualities, but I don't know. Maybe without, I mean, it's necessary to have a direct experience of the place, to live there, and to you know, to understand how it is to actually have half of the surface of the house dedicated to being a greenhouse. These axes still bother me, because to me, they express, and I'm not sure they are really needed structurally. I think they should be avoided. But this is my opinion. You know, I'm subjective perhaps, but this X, this crossing, I mean, we know very well the symbolism of this X. You cross something out, you know, it means interdiction. That's what it means. And there are plenty of them in this house. But the most bothering one is here. When I look at this image, I have the clear feeling that this is a cage. And if I am to live in, it's like I'm like a bird in a cage, trapped in a cage. To me, this is not freedom. I mean, yes, the doors are widely open, but the X is telling me stay away. Even though, of course, factually I could go through it, but with a little bit of effort. Anyway, thankfully, there is the old the paraphernalia of what the people who live there have. Things, objects, clothes, and so on, which give life to what otherwise is almost a lifeless architecture. I am tempted to think, like, for example, there is you know, a novel by Musil, A Man Without Qualities. I imagine they intended to create an architecture without qualities, kind of an equivalent of The Man Without Qualities, a gray architecture. But by doing so, you need badly what these people have. Otherwise, it would be, you know, just schemata that you live in. Anyway. But it is, all in all, it is an interesting contribution to the world of architecture. And just like in the case of Ishigami, the old furniture, and you see, it's not an accident that here, I mean, you could say it is an accident that these people brought in very heavy furniture. Well, I don't know, maybe it is an accident, maybe it's not an accident. Maybe the people who live here had the need for something solid and heavy and, you know, with a lot of material. And because, yes, when the architecture is so schematic and so diagrammatic, you cannot afford to also bring the furniture in the same spirit or maybe in the same way. So yes, this old furniture does look good here. Without it, I think the house would have been less, like, for example, here, I think this is more, it looks more sterile than what we see here, exactly because this is, you know, kind of modernistic, functionalist cabinets and so on. Now, if I look at this image, you know, the fence is more interesting than the house. And the fence is very old-fashioned, and you know, I mentioned the word and I regret it. I mentioned it, misanthropy. Well, if I look at this, there is a level of misanthropy here. No, I mean, this is a building which turns its back completely towards the street. It's completely opaque. This is not an inviting house. This is not a house which tells the street, I want to have a dialogue with you. No, it's a house which dramatically turns its back towards the public life, meaning the street. This is what I see. Now it opens a little bit here and there, but all in all, it's a rather morose building, in my opinion. Sir, the greenhouse, the largest space in the house, is actually a greenhouse. And these are the les chambres, the rooms, chambre and séjour. Well, the séjour, usually the living room, is the most ample space in the house. But in this case, almost the chambre de lit, the bedroom, well, it's in section, they are about the same, but I don't know. When I look at this section, of course, a lot of the activities of the living room take place in the greenhouse. It's just that I'm not sure that without air conditioning or without keeping these doors continuously open, or I still think it could be suffocating. But it's true. I'm not a plant. I never lived in a greenhouse. Centre de jour pour post-adolescence in Bègle, 1994. This is a public building, an institutional building. It's the same kind of architecture where there are touches of wood, but otherwise the building is totally metal and glass. And visually or aesthetically, what I look at is not really unpleasant. It's just that, in my opinion, this is an architecture which does need air conditioning. I don't think the ventilation is easily obtained here without some kind of mechanical interventions. Plus, the actual spaces that are used by people are in the dark. As you can see here, there is darkness there. And we are going to see this even more in other works with very deep spaces where the distance between where the human activity takes place and the facades of the building, meaning the exterior of the building, is the distance is very, very big. Now, it's not difficult to imagine without some kind of air conditioning. I think you melt down there in the summer because of that extensive glass surface. And it's true, I'm an adversary of the demagogy of glass. I think we should restrain ourselves from using so much glass. Anybody knows, including Philip Johnson, who said that, having a glass house like he had increases dramatically, and he was very rich. He afforded big bills. But for a common person, what do you do when you have to pay a lot in order to have a bearable temperature in the summer and a bearable temperature in the winter? In my opinion, again, this is not a modest architecture. To truly build in a modest way is to be very sensitive to the environment, even to the bills that the users of the building receive monthly or otherwise. Otherwise, what can we say? Yes, the plan is interesting, it's even ludic, to an extent because of these curvatures, but we see again a lot of toilets here that I placed within the building, you know, here and here. So again, without mechanical ventilation, this is not going to function properly. So, and yes, you would say this is a rational architecture. Yes, there is playfulness, but the playfulness is contained. These curves, the Dionysian gestures, are strictly controlled by the peripheral line of the building. If I look aesthetically, if I look at this plan, what do I see? I see a corridor, I see doors, I see little rooms, little smaller or bigger. I see conventionality, and then I see this, you know, a more ludic, playful space. But all in all, everything is controlled at the outskirts. The perimeter line of the building of the plan is strictly controlling everything. So the freedom is contained, it exists to an extent, but not to a very large extent. And we can see even here the walls are very bare. I mean, you know, they are curved, but they are blunt. They are, you know, nothing happens on these walls. Now, of course, with a graffiti artist or with a child with some chalk in his hand, these walls would become full of life. There is a little plant here which seems to say, I'm bringing life in, and it is needed, yes. I don't know. To me, this is not a very interesting architecture. I confess. I mean, and it's built, you know, rather, you know, poorly. I mean, you know, these materials, you know, this. That's why it's so needy to bring in some heavy oak furniture or whatever, you know, heavy old antiques, you know. They would add something to the building which the building doesn't have. Musée Archéologique de Saint, 1995. Now here, I don't know exactly what they did. I think only small interventions, and otherwise the old buildings did the job, and I like the old buildings and I like the old tree. Here we have a little bit of color, and I salute the presence of the color, but it's a rare event in their architecture. Most of their architecture is very, very gray, and actually cold, because it's not only that it's gray, but it's also metal and glass. We are dealing with metal, glass, and grayness. And do they say yes to life? I think they barely murmur that, you know. In my opinion, this is not so much a modest architecture, but an anemic architecture. And at least Ishigami, I mentioned him before, he even employed the word himself, anemic architecture. And I would understand in a way why certain architects today would create a so-called anemic architecture. In a way, it's a disbelief in the very act of building, in the very act of erecting a building. Maybe it's a form of pessimism. It's possible that even Lacaton and Vassal have a pessimistic turn of mind. It's possible. But here, you know, the whole thing is saved by the old parts of the building, you know, like these remnants. And also in this case, the presence of the color helps, and the beautiful tree. And all in all, you know, this is at least a bearable situation. Place au Coq in Bordeaux, 1996. Again, a context, an urban context within which they operated. I'm not sure exactly what they did here. Maybe this very bare, park, if I am to call it park, I would say that to an extent, it's possible that this is an architecture of pessimism. But maybe what I said is unwarranted. Maybe I'm wrong, but I see this attitude where you reject invention, you reject personalized aesthetics. It's almost an architecture through subtraction. You subtract, you reduce, you cut, and I could understand philosophically such an attitude, but architecture is still a visual art, and you can only accept so far, so much grayness and coldness and metal and glass. Here again, the building is old. That's not how they build. These are existing buildings. But on the other hand, here I would say that maybe, the very lack of qualities of this park, if I am to call it so, it could have a certain charm that it didn't try to be emphatically seductive. I think there is something positive potentially in such an attitude. Fortunately, there are the trees, and the trees, not only that they bring in oxygen, but they also bring, variety in terms of, almost cultural expression. Université Pierre Mendès in France, this is a building in Grenoble. They built in various times. Now, really, if we didn't know that Lacaton and Vassal received the Pritzker, and if we looked at this building, we wouldn't be so impressed, would we? We have seen such buildings all over the world. And again, lots of glass, lots of air conditioning. Again, this is not a modest architecture. An architecture building where you need a lot of mechanical intervention in order to have a bearable atmosphere within the building is not a modest architecture. Now, I'm surprised actually that there are critics who think so. It is modest in terms of aesthetical aspiration, yes. It's a regular architectural language, modular, sometimes more inspired, other times less inspired, like here. What's so great really about this building? You tell me. I have seen countless buildings like this, built by architects whose names are not known. Yes, here there is, there are some certain qualities, but still, the extensive usage of glass to me is very problematic. And here you have a double glazing, you have that intermediate space which they use all the time. They intend to put plants there, but between the exterior and the rooms where the human beings are, you create a sandwich space where you place plants, themselves prisoners of I would say, immodest gesture. Because if we love nature, we shouldn't entrap the plants within cubical glass structures. This is still, I would say, a dangerous expression of man as the measure of all things. Why don't we let the plants be outside, where God made them? Why are we placing them within the metallic gray structures that we build for them? Why? To me, look at these people. They are ruining their eyes by working at the table with the back of the light. as opposed to those people who study in Exeter Library by Lewis Kahn, because there Lewis Kahn did think about how someone reads a book or studies or writes with the light coming either from the left and from the right. These people, as I said, are ruining their eyes and maybe even their, mental dispositions. Look at them. They are all with their backs towards, and this really has to do with architecture. Lacaton and Vassal are guilty for not thinking about how this space is being used. I don't think these tables were placed there without the knowledge of the architect. You know, why the tables were not placed perpendicularly on this wall to receive light from the side and also look at the plants. Really, to me, this is unbelievable. I mean, you know, these are simple things, functional things. I'm not talking about sophisticated things. The people who offered the Pritzker didn't see these images. They didn't think that this is unnatural and is even, I almost felt saying obnoxious. Yeah, I mean, look at this person. You know, I know how it is to work, to write, to read with your back towards light. It's very unpleasant. Anyway, let's imagine that actually the arrangement of the tables did not belong to the architects, but I think it did, because it's the same kind of attitude we saw even in the first house they built that I showed, where the kitchen and the bathrooms were all in the center of the structure of the building, in order to leave this space for what? Circulation, or to turn your back towards, I don't know. As for these plants being trapped here between two glazed surfaces, I don't know. I don't know. Why should we have so many glass houses, you know? To me, a glass house, I'm sorry, it's kind of like a zoo for plants. You know, in a zoo, you trap animals. In a glass house, you trap plants. It's still about the control of the human being on the poor plants or on the poor animals. Shouldn't we abstain from this, you know? I mean, I imagine when God created the world, and if he wanted truly the plants to be all inside glass houses, he would have made glass houses, but he didn't. Well, you know, then he created Lacaton and Vassal, so they did it instead. Too much glass and too much grayness and too much metal for my taste. Anyway, yes, this is their attitude, you know. Always this sandwich space within which they place plants, and behind it we have people who torture their eyes with their backs towards both the plants and the light in order to scribble something in the notebooks. As for this, to me, it's depressing. It's depressing because I see now, again, maybe they are not responsible for the positioning of these tables, of these desks. Although I imagine they are, because usually, you know, for such a public building, the architect also provides the interior design and so on. It's very regular and, unimaginative. And yes, the light is nice in this case, but I don't know. If you look at this building, you would see these impressionistic dots of color, which add some life to a building otherwise kind of lifeless. And yes, maybe with the plants that would happen. But when you think that all of this is glass, and is actually, there are two layers of glass, here you suffocate. That's the truth, Lacaton and Vassal, without air conditioning. And air conditioning means being against your time. When we talk about sustainability, When we talk about the climate change, we talk about pollution. To rely on air conditioning is to ignore the serious realities of our time. This is what I believe. On the other hand, I like these stairs here, how they contradict in a way the regularity of the Cartesian regularity of the building. That's not bad. But you see clearly in this section what we already discussed, that between the rooms and the outside, there is this intermediate space, which is in essence, the glass house where the plants are supposed to be, squeezed in, because that's what it is, squeezed in, entrapped. Well, this is a little better because, at least some tables, not everybody. I have an issue with this, I look at this poor student here. He's really losing his sight here, But anyway, let's not be a functionalist. What bothers me the most is that, again, you cannot live in this space without air conditioning. I don't think you can. And if I was a plant myself, I wouldn't like to be trapped here. No, I wouldn't. I would rather be outside where God made me, not here, trapped between two glass walls by Lacaton and Vassal, and also covered with glass. No, I wouldn't like to be trapped like this, sorry. And if I was a bird, I would not like to be trapped in a cage either. Maison en Dordogne, 1997. This is it. I mean, they do have qualities, it's a certain essentialism here, which I like. This also makes me think this, I don't know, I think this house perhaps would have been more at home in Japan than in Dordogne. But, and that's why I keep making references to Ishigami. And not only Ishigami, I like here the archetypal schematic design. There is something that I like, but again, it's a lot of metal and a lot of grayness. Thankfully, yes, people have furniture. And why is it that people didn't buy furniture that was metallic and gray? Well, I guess because they didn't like it. That's why. It's a big house. It's almost like a warehouse, actually. I have seen other houses like this. This is not just theirs. Just like in the case of the first house we saw, you need an additional roofing here, in this case, an umbrella. But isn't it strange to have an umbrella within a room? You have to, because, I mean, again, this is not the modesty. I'm sorry, this is not modesty. I mean, under this glass roof, you melt down, or even if it's not glass, you melt down in the summer. And in the winter, you better have money to pay the bills for heating this space. But on the other hand, you could say this is a way to bring the outside in, because usually this kind of arrangement takes place in the patio, outside in the courtyard, but not inside the house. This is something I like. I always liked furniture for the outdoors, but inside. In this case, that's exactly what we got, thanks to Lacaton and Vassal. Yeah. But all in all, grayness is its great majesty in their architecture. Metal, nothing but metal. I mean, if you look at this detail, so to speak, of the building, this fragment of the building, you would expect this to have a very different function, not to be a home, not to be a house. Maybe, you know, some kind of industrial building to, I don't know, store, you know, products of some sort. In essence, it's a cage. And within the cage, there are signs of life because of the people who love wood. Like in this case, we see wood, and wood is warm and is very welcomed. But the building is rather cold and gray and frigid, in my opinion. That's why even these very banal chairs, and they are banal, and the table too, they look kind of okay here. Because in contrast to the building, almost anything would look okay. I look at this picture and I like everything except the architecture. I mean, you know, this ceiling, part of the roofing and the walls, you know, usually you don't make them the same way, you know, and even the same color. It's something. I feel like spraying some, you know, doing some graffiti on those frigid walls and on that ceiling, really. Or bring a child with some chalk and allow the child to get wild. Fortunately, again, the furniture saves the show, and textiles and so on. Without them, it would have been yeah, just a few days ago, I showed works by Sigurd Leverens in Sweden and the poetics of the brickwork. I really miss the brick here, you know. I mean, all these panels of steel, you know, gray steel and cold and slick but cold. I don't know, they depress me. It's like living in a bunker, you know, living in some kind of a concentration camp, almost, almost. Otherwise, graphically speaking, somehow this kind of aesthetics I feel more associated not with Europe, but with Japan for some reason. It's a big house. Again, it's not a modest house. Maison Allège Cap Ferret, 1998. This one is interesting, but I'm still a little bit perplexed and I don't know how to take it. They had the idea to allow the trees to pierce the building. So the buildings, the trunks, no, the trees, the trunks of the trees go through the building all the way through. Um, I don't know. I don't know very well what to think of it, you know. Isn't it somehow the same attitude as trapping the bird and trapping the plants and now trapping the trees inside the house? You know, I mean, is this really modesty? Um, you would say, come on, they didn't cut the trees. It's true, they didn't cut the trees, but they entrapped them. I mean, this tree, you know, is conditioned by these holes in the floor, and also we'll look at the ceiling, at the roof. It's I I don't know if I was a tree, and sometimes I wish I was. I would have asked myself, would I feel happy in such a condition to be trapped inside a room? I mean, this is a tree inside the room. That's what it is. These people have a problem. They bring the plants inside the glass house. They bring the trees inside the room. I don't know. Is it the right attitude? to bring the tree inside the living room or some, some other space. Look at them. At first, when I saw this picture, I thought, my God, did they cut the trees to use the chopped trees as some kind of a structure for the building? Then I realized that no, the trees actually go all the way through the building. But even that to me is really, this tree doesn't have a lot of freedom. It's forced by Lacaton and Vassal to restrain itself, to grow only, with very small deviations from the trajectory that the architects decided is the only one acceptable. It's kind of strange. They give the impression that they love nature, but I'm actually not so convinced. I'm not so convinced it's true here. I don't know if this was the only place where they were able to build a house. How would you do it? There were trees there, and of course the option was not to cut them. I agree. Let's not cut down the trees, but maybe then a different site should have been found, maybe. Otherwise, yeah, we could say it's interesting, we are modern human beings, we control nature, we control everything. Soon we'll go to Mars or to the moon, so why not have trees inside the living room, right? For the pleasure of man, the measure of all things. But I still don't know what that tree truly feels, I wonder if these are not, to an extent, perversions of an exhausted human being at the beginning of the 21st century or at the end of the 20th century. Look at the model. The house, again, gray, and then the trees, I am tempted to think that if I was a tree, I would not have liked to be treated in this way. No. I mean, is this the way we make peace with nature? I don't think so. I mean, really, this tree cannot go a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right because it destroys the house. The house is like, how do you call it? It's, I don't find out the word, is chaining the tree. The tree is not free like this. In as much as the plants behind two glass walls are not free. I'm sorry, are not free. Now, if this gives the illusion to these people that they have an intimate connection with the outdoors, with the outside, that they are inside, but they're also in the forest. Come on, come on. Look at this poor tree here. Squeezing itself through this round hole here that the architect provided for it. Now, I don't like, it's something I don't like. The more I look at this, the more I'm infuriated, actually, because it shows lack of sensitivity towards these trees. It's using the trees, for some kind of exotic, aesthetical little pleasure. Maison à Coutras, 2000s, again. What we look at is glass houses. It's a glass house. This is what it is. A glass house and a greenhouse. And it's, if you compare this glass house, or I mean this greenhouse with the glass house that Philip Johnson built for himself, In that case, I think there is, in his case, was more honest in a way. This is misleading because this is a greenhouse, and it's a greenhouse for human beings, not for plants. And although I read that there was an experiment in the Netherlands, a family lived for 2 or 3 years in a greenhouse, and you know, they, on one hand they loved it, but on the other hand, yes, there were problems with humidity and the big difference in temperatures between summer and winter. At bottom, probably any discussion, serious discussion of the work of Lacaton and Vassal comes down to this. Is living inside a greenhouse the way to go? When it snows, it's very cold. When it's hot, it's unbearably hot. And just like in the first house that we looked at, here the arrangement of the spaces is similar. We have the rectangle of the whole house divided in two. Half of it is a serre, meaning a greenhouse, and the other half is, you know, the house per se, the living room and 3 bedrooms. I mean, 2 bedrooms and the bureau, you know, like an office, a study room, and then, you know, kitchen and bathrooms. I would say that the functional arrangement within the house is rather prosaic. I mean, you know, it's not, this is a prosaic architecture. Besides the innovation of bringing, cutting the house in two and half of it dedicated to being a greenhouse, in essence, it's not, you know, it's not a very imaginative architecture at all. But the surprise effect is that when people bring in their furniture, you get a lot of variety, especially within the greenhouse. I still wonder how it is here in the winter and how it is here in the hot summer. Yeah, in essence, that's what it is, living in a greenhouse or 2 greenhouses, like we see here. OK, site de création contemporaine dans le Palais de Tokyo à Paris, in Paris 2001. I like very much this, I confess, but this is not what they did. This was the existing structure of the building, and I like the fact that they stripped off the finishes. I'm a great adversary of finishes. I like raw materials, raw things, and this is raw. For this, I admire them, because here, you know, it shows unconventionality and is really in the spirit of création contemporaine, contemporary creation. Yes, it's still grayness, but here the grayness is more bearable because of the tectonics of the materials that we look at. You know, it's heavy grayness, and you know, I admire the fact that you know, this institution accepted something like this. You know, in Paris. This shows, you know, young spirit and unconventional, and I think we can find inspiration in something like this. Because art is not about hiding things away. Art is not about makeup. Art is about truth. And the you know, the structural truth of this building is like this, if it's not hidden. But again, we could comment on a possible pessimism on the side of the architects, that, you know, this kind of aesthetics is, I mean, you know, at the opposite, you place, let's say, Baroque architecture. Here is a morose grayness that seems to say we don't have too many reasons to be extremely exuberant, and certainly not colorfully so. Although you'll see a little bit later a few images with some color. This is the building in Paris. It's you know, an important work. I don't know exactly what they did here. And I should have double checked if this building was not built by Auguste Perret. I like even this. I like, you know, the fact that that they reject, you know, a placid finish, and that they show, in a way, almost the misery of the world. Yeah, we could talk a little bit about this, but being a space for, you know, contemporary art manifestations, I guess it's fine. This is not the opera in Paris. My Garnier is not. To welcome the ruin is something, I think, to be appreciated. I dislike what I see here. This is, you know, is more spoiled, this interior, but it doesn't have really anything inciting. Now, touches of you know, Nipponia, I almost felt like saying. Interior design. Lacaton and Vassal. Okay, Café Una de, this is in Vienna, and very interesting work. Interesting because unexpected. I mean, these two architects who are the you know, the advocates of grayness, they created here a ceiling which does take one by surprise. Look at it, you know, and I like the fact that Lacaton and Vassal were able, in a way, to turn against themselves. Why exactly they chose this kind of ornamentation, which is almost Islamic, in Vienna, I don't know. I mean, Vienna does have, of course, a tradition of the ornament, even if Vienna is also the place where Adolf Loos wrote Ornament and Crime, or Crime and Ornament. I always have them. I still don't know exactly if crime came first or ornament came first. Anyway, but as you can see, Lacaton and Vassal, who didn't show any kind of interest in ornamentation before, all of a sudden they go against Adolf Loos, and they create this surreally ornamental ceiling, and I'm happy they did. And I actually think I am surprised, because I was a few times in this building, but I don't remember. I never went to the cafe. That's why I didn't see this ceiling at the Architekturzentrum in Vienna. So there are signs of hope here, actually, that the great knights of grayness also were capable of surprising us and themselves with such a work. I think this has to be applauded, that they were able to do something like this in a different city, and it shows that they can be open-minded and that they are not dogmatic. This is good. But again, I'm not sure about the nature of the ornamentation. I'm not sure it's exactly the Viennese spirit, but I still appreciate it. I like it. So Lacaton and Vassal in Vienna, in Vienne. Thank God they got rid of the eternal grayness here. You know, all of a sudden I can breathe now. Bureau, Nantes, offices in Nantes, 2001. Glass, glass, and glass again. Without glass, we cannot be. It seems I'm so tired of this glass, really. Again, a lot of glass, a lot of air conditioning. It's as simple as this. I mean, as complicated as this, because it's not inexpensive to use a lot of air conditioning, and it is a source of pollution. We should think seriously about this these days, these years. This was done almost 20 years ago, so I think we can excuse them. The ideology of the glass was still on very, very strongly, and still is. I mean, really, if you think about the architecture of our time, and you remove the glass, you probably remove, 75%, if not 85% of all the architecture of the world. I mean, the glass took over the world of architecture. And it wasn't always like this. I mean, you just have to look back a few centuries and, now glass, glass, and glass again. And again, the offices, these people being rather in darkness, and near the so much glass, nothing is happening except circulation. Isn't it strange? I mean, these people are literally in darkness. You can see them, they are in darkness. I mean, yes, from a certain point of view, it's good because they look at monitors and laptops and so on. But otherwise, it's kind of strange, no? It's, anyway. But so much glass sickens me, it really does. Immeuble d'habitation collective in Floirac, étude en course, 2003. I don't know if I don't have pictures because the étude is still on course. In 2003 was habitations, a mall house au sein de la Cité Manifeste from 2005. Again, greenhouses. Even in terms of the shape and the sections, the cross sections, the building is very similar to something that we already saw. Look at it. That's what they stand for. Now, I don't know. As I said, I never lived in a greenhouse, but my feeling is that it cannot be too pleasant. But they persevere. I guess maybe there are some qualities. Otherwise, I can't explain why they keep building greenhouses for people. Thin and metallic and gray. Thin and metallic and gray. That's what it is. That intermezzo in Vienna was really the exception that confirms the rule. And again, the same kind of distribution of spaces. We have the apartments, and then we have the la serre, we have the greenhouse. They do it all the time. They probably love this. And of course, the greenhouse is here. Almost all their works are based on this paradigm. We have seen this. It's nothing new. I really wonder, how is the quality of the air there? How is it? I'm tempted to think it's not great. Maybe I'm wrong. Maison Kerema, 2005. The same thing. The same thing, like we have seen. But here there are some interesting things. There are 3 houses. Yeah. To me, what I look at here is this is very Japanese somehow. And if I was a filmmaker, I would even make a film here, you know, and I would say it's in Japan. I'm thinking of certain scenes from the films of the great Japanese director. What's his name? My memory is failing me now. Anyway, I'll remember. But all in all, here we do see architectural skill, and even in terms of landscaping, it is an architecture that is sophisticated here. And yes, it is metallic, yet it is gray. But somehow these 3 buildings, because there are 3 buildings, create a unity. Let's see, I have a plan somewhere. Just a second, I'll come back. You see, well, here we don't see the landscaping. We only see the 3 houses. But this work seems to me a little better than the previous works, although in essence is about the same thing. But at least here the roofing is solid and opaque and doesn't let light through it. And I guess this is what differentiates this work from some previous works that is not really living in a greenhouse here because of the roofing. And yes, it is gray, this roofing, but I think it works in the context of the language, architectural language of the house or the houses as a whole. This work, maison, actually should have been maisons with an S at the end. At Kerema, I consider them some of the better works. They are still, of course, Lacaton and Vassal, but I think the difference, the important difference is the roofing. It is a sloping roof, but it's not with glass or transparent material, and this creates a certain gravity that the house has, which I think is important, and even a certain heaviness. As for these so-called doors, which are actually walls, movable walls, you know, I don't know. I mean, when you close them, you are saying no to the outside. Like this, you seem to say yes, but they're still, I mean, you know, they are not so gently asserting themselves here. You know, they have a presence which is rather deterministic, I would say. But anyway, that was their choice. Here they are, the 3 houses. They have a greenhouse here as well. But you know, these kind of openings in the wall, you know, they made me think of stables, you know, for horses or something. I don't know. Anyway, Pôle universitaire de sciences de gestion, Bordeaux, 2006. Glass, glass, and glass again. Ah, too much glass, in my opinion. Much too much glass, and too much grayness, and too much metal. I don't think they ever did a building with using stones or bricks or no. I mean, look here, you know, I mean, you suffocate here in the summer, you know. It's, anyway. Cave Castelmore, Ombre Castelmore, 2007, but I don't have, what is this one? Yeah, it's this one, the wine cooperative and cellar in, I didn't know what that is, Cave. It's a building for a wine cooperative. Many important architects build for the wine industry. Why? Because they have the money, that's why. People drink. And as long as people drink, the companies that produce the wine prosper and have the money to hire Herzog and de Moron and Lacaton, Vassal, and others. What can we say? Are we surprised? Of course not. This is Lacaton and Vassal. Metal, metal, and metal again. And maybe the wine likes it. I don't know. It's an industrial building in essence. But when I look at these plants, these so-called wild plants, by the way, I like the word rewilding. And I read that there was such an article in Arch Daily about rewilding, meaning to bring back or to allow nature to manifest herself in a wild way. So, you know, thus the word rewilding. And this is what we see here. The rewilding nature, the wild nature. Well, not too wild, of course, but isn't it beautiful? Isn't she beautiful? And why is it that our buildings are so, in my opinion, so without grace? If we compare ourselves even with this so-called natura selvatica, wild nature, you know, I mean, is this building creating any kind of dialogue with what we see even here, just here, or with these trees? I don't see any kind of dialogue. No, it's not. It's a blunt, metallic, gray building which doesn't give a damn about having a dialogue with the plants. Otherwise, Lacaton and Vassal claim they admire and they love so much. If they love nature so much, why would they create such an interior? You know, this interior is depressingly gray. I mean, I understand it's an industrial building, you know, this is for the production of wine, but they do exactly the same kind of architecture for universities and for private homes, exactly the same kind of architecture. Fortunately, we have the life of the wine and the wood that contains the wine. But otherwise, if you remove these things, if something in this picture does not belong to Lacaton and Vassal, are these things the containers of the wine, the barrels? If you remove them, you get a genuine Lacaton and Vassal, metal, gray, cold architecture. That's it. Right? Fortunately, we see some stone here, but this is not This is not the work. It's from the side. Anyway, moving forward. I love these ceramic tiles here, you know, but that's again from the existing old buildings, not from what they did. And yes, large spaces for the production, the massive production of wine to be distributed worldwide. French wine, after all. Hold Exposition Paris Nord Villepinte, 2007. Welcome to Lacaton and Vassal. The same kind of architecture. It has some virtues. It has some virtues. It has a certain almost gray melancholia here, but again, when I look at these poor plants aligned here, you know, they're so pathetically controlled, and no, and no again. I mean, what is the function of this building? Hold exposition, an exhibition space, quite large. Of course, you can place some small aircrafts there. Again, without air conditioning, these buildings would not function. I'm sorry. If the French have the money to squander on the electric bills, let them do it. But in my opinion, it's clearly not a sustainable architecture, and it's not an architect. And I continue to think that this, presence of the plants is misleading, because these plants are actually trapped inside these spaces. They are not free. These plants are giving the false impression that the creators of this building truly love plants. If they truly loved plants, they would have left them outside, not inside, not trap them like this. I am against this. This is like, again, animals in a zoo. Would you say that those animals are free? They are not free. This is, I mean, look at these sketches, you know. Oh yes, the sun is now is reaching the plant, and the planet is so happy to be trapped inside its cage here. I don't think the plant is happy. No, I don't think so. I wouldn't. If I was a plant, I would hate to be crucified here inside this space, entrapped, the prisoner of this space of Lacaton and Vassal. I would hate it. It's also narrow. And I'm really, you know, they didn't realize that this is trapping the plants. They are trapping the plants. That's what they do. But they are also trapping the human beings behind this wall in a different way. École d'Architecture de Nantes. This is the School of Architecture in Nantes, 2009. Well, fortunately, here we see some diagonals which create a little bit of movement. I like this picture as an image, and I'm not always against grayness. You know, grayness could have sometimes its own poetry, but if you repeat it ad infinitum, what here is positive is, again, that we have concrete, we have architectonic elements which have weight. They are heavy, they are solid, as opposed to the ethereal glass and steel structures that we just saw. But that's just a fragment of the building. Otherwise, glass, and glass again. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you know, is there a big difference between L'École d'Architecture, the School of Architecture, and that industrial space for the production of wine that we just saw? I don't think it's such a great difference, really. As if the functions are very similar. The production, the industrial production of wine, and the teaching of architecture. Isn't it strange? The architectures are almost similar. Again, fortunately here there are some diagonals, so it's not everything is And yes, it's nice to see an old bike here, which brings a little humanity into the picture. Otherwise, you know, again, if we didn't know that this was done by two Pritzker laureates, we'd say, sure, some metal and glass building, you know, as there are so many in the world, nothing so unique, really. And look here, not so much here, but look here. This is like a parking lot. An underground parking of some sort. Where is the natural light? Where are the windows? You know, these people are, if I would see here cars, I would say this is a parking lot underneath the building. I don't know. I mean, yes, here we have, before the pandemic, we have the gathering of people. And here we have, you know, some activity, some, you know, whatever exercise in whatever they did here in the School of Architecture. Here we have the chromatics of the plastic chairs, but the building in its essence is the same old story, gray and cold and yeah. Could you imagine Antoni Gaudí studying architecture here in Nantes at one of these tables? What kind of architecture would he produce? Would he still produce Sagrada Familia? Maybe, or maybe not. But the interior is very not conducive to that kind of so-called fanciful architecture. Maybe here is a depressed student. I would be depressed too, with so much grayness and coldness and metal and glass, really. I mean, these are huge spaces, you know. I mean, imagine you are here, I don't know, maybe this is 6 meters, so you are 18 meters away from the exterior of the building. If you are here in the center, 18 meters, that's a long distance, you know, you are far away from light and from the exterior and from natural light, yeah. If this was for the production of wine, I would not have been surprised, but it's not for the production of wine. Imagine you are here, right? Somewhere here or here. Where are the windows? Far away on both sides, very far away. This is dark. This is dark and you need electrical light, artificial light, and so on. And anyway, welcome to modernity. Transformation de la Tour Bois le Prêtre in Paris, 2009, they got a prize, L'Équerre d'Argent in 2011. Again, glass. I don't think Lacaton and Vassal can breathe without glass. They have to have glass. Without glass, they would vanish. The more glass, the better. Look at this. Everything is glass. Even the parapets, the handrails, the parapets of the balconies, everything is glass, glass, and glass again. That glass in the winter brings the cold in. That glass in the summer brings a terrible hotness in. Didn't they know this? I think they knew, but they ignored because at that time in 2000s, whatever, that is 10, 15 years ago, no, 10 years ago, maybe people thought that pollution does not exist or is not important, and the funds of France are not limited thanks to the cultural tourism, so they can pay for the air conditioners. Really, I think a revolt has to take place against glass. We have to fight against glass. Aménagement des friches du Palais du Tokyo Well, we already saw the Palais de Tokyo. I don't know exactly what this amendment, interventions in 2012. I couldn't figure out what, what they did in 2012 compared to the other year when they did that work, you remember. And now, Frac Nord-Pas de Calais, this is a very important work by them from 2017 to 2013. We already saw their liking for doubleness, for two-ness, if I am to use a word invented by Peter Eisenman, two-ness. We see two adjacent structures, identical, it's like twin buildings, but with differences. You know, they created the caging, the cage is similar, but the exterior shape of the two buildings is similar, but inside various things happen. I like this building because I like doubleness, I like two-ness. I think, I truly think this is one of the best works, if not the best. Otherwise, of course, it's the same Lacaton and Vassal, metal and glass. Metal and glass, but here they also had the chance to work with an existing structure, and that existing structure added another dimension to their work. I'm not so sure about the way this wording was placed there. In my opinion, could have been done much better. But otherwise, this work is rather good. And it's rather good because I think their intervention within an existing context was helped by the existing context. These industrial buildings, old buildings, do have a great potential everywhere, including in our country. And you know, there are many conversions or reconversions from an industrial function to a cultural function, and that's what we see here as well. Otherwise, you know, if you're allergic to grayness, you would be allergic here too. This is almost, as I said, I mentioned that writing Men Without Qualities by Robert Musil. This is architecture without qualities. And sometimes an architecture without qualities, without so-called qualities, or so-called without qualities, could have qualities. I am willing to accept that there could be poetry in an architecture which tries to move away from so-called having obvious so-called qualities. Kind of ground zero architecture. A ground zero architecture could be appealing. But when they do this all the time, you know, it could be a little bit tiring, I think. Fortunately, fortunately, you know, it has been said, ars longa vita brevis. Art is long, life is short. You know, in the paraphrasing, we could say, you know, the architecture of Lacaton and Vassal is short, and the colorfulness and variety of the furniture and whatever people brought in is long. You know, they are so needed, these things. And why do you think they are covered? You know, what we look at here is exactly what the building does not have. You know, these sofas are probably very functionalist. These pieces of fabric were brought to cover this, because this kind of ornamentation and colorfulness was and is totally missing in the building. And whoever did this understood, I mean, you know, they needed to bring what the building didn't have. And this is very often the case with their architecture. What their buildings do not have is compensated by either the furniture or the fabrics or whatever, by what is not architectural. So to put it another way, the non-architectural is saving the architecture. Glass, suffocating in the summer and provoking trembling in the winter. But they don't seem to care. Glass, 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 and glass again. This was before the pandemic. Is this the building for the industrial production of wine? No, it's not. But in contrast, look how beautiful it is to finally have some color. I really like this. This is an interior which is pleasant, and is pleasant exactly because there is the joy and the sensuality of color. You know, I thought of it. It's kind of ironical and paradoxical. The diagrammatic axonometrics or plans are very, very colorful, like here. But their buildings are totally gray. I mean, you know, look at this facade. Look at this facade. Everything is with, you know, with thin grayish lines. And the plans, we are going to see other plans where also the diagrams are very, very almost voluptuously, almost sinfully colorful, but not the buildings, the diagrams. Again, the division of the plan in two parts, one part with many functions, and then a part in this case is not a serre or a greenhouse, but again, we have this duality. It happens that I like dualities. In general, I have myself lots of dualities. So, but this is actually very obvious in their works. So here we have two different spaces separated by this rue intérieure, the interior street within the buildings. Well, the so-called intimate connection with the above, with the sky, with light and so on, requires a very carefully orchestrated technology, as we can see here. So, you know, there is a price to pay for freedom. Le Grand Sud, salle de spectacle polyvalente, Lille, 2013. Here we see some color, and I'm glad we see it. I'm also glad we see people together. The pandemic is not truly allowing this to happen any longer to this extent, but otherwise, it's almost the Crystal Palace, much smaller, by Joseph Paxton, about whom I will talk tomorrow. Glass, glass, and glass again. And grayness inside. This is almost, you know, the School of Architecture in Nantes or any other building by them. And the typical separation where you have the functional spaces and then you have a working space that separates those spaces I mentioned from from the outside. And in the proximity of the wall or of the glass of the exterior facade, nothing happens usually except walking. I mentioned the Exeter Library by Louis Kahn, where is the very opposite in the proximity of the glass of the envelope of the building. There are the individual desks where you can read and study and so on. But he is just walking. Anyway, you know, it's a spectacle. It's a salle polyvalente. And the building very gray, but look at the diagrams. Colors everywhere. Colors. Colors. I wonder they didn't smile or they didn't feel the irony. The drawings are colorful, but the building is totally gray. Well, good that at least in the drawings they felt the need for color. Not in the section though. Kind of depressing, this section, if you ask me. Okay, and now we go to Quartier du Grand Parc, régénération de trois tours vouées à la démolition. This is something that became famous for transforming old social housing into you know, like refurbishing them. This is in Bordeaux from 2016. But here, I don't know, maybe there is a little devil in me, maybe it's not so little, but so this is the old building. This is the building they wanted to demolish. Why? I'm not sure why, because to me, it's not really a building one should demolish. But we'll see now how they transform this building according to the plans of Lacaton Vassal. This is the building. Now, my question to you, and maybe it's a little bit malicious question, but if I look at this building and I look at this building, is it really a great progress? I mean, this is the building that was supposed to be demolished, and this was the building that was refurbished. I mean, it's the same building, but it was dressed in a different way by Lacaton and Vassal. I don't know. I mean, this building, yes, is banal, it's prosaic, but at least had some colors. Well, this one is deadly gray. Well, fortunately, the people inside had interesting artifacts and objects and so on. No, but really, if I look at these two things, what if we think the other way? This was the old building, which was supposed to be demolished, and some architects transformed it into this building. I don't know, maybe my thinking is distorted by heat or whatever, but I don't really think this is an immense progress from this. No. I'm sorry, and it was done with a lot of expenditures, and you'll understand why. Again, welcome to Lacaton and Vassal. Certain things don't change. The people are behind this, and then this space is for whatever. So there are two screens that separate the building. The initial facade of the building was here. They added this. You'll understand how. Glass, glass, and glass again. Look how they did. They planted, they added this thing to the facade of the old building. Is this wisdom? I am not sure. I really am not sure. But I don't want to become cynical. I would accept that it is an improvement, although I don't really feel like it, like saying this, but again, life has the upper hand. The colorfulness of the furniture, the naivete of the people who, furnished. I say naivete actually with admiration. The naivete, as opposed to the sophistication of the architects who only use grayness. Fortunately, these people are more real than the architects. Yes, those people who bought those pillows, who love that carpet, and who love this, this chair and whatever they have here. I prefer them. They are more real, in my opinion, than the so-called sophisticated architects who only build with grayness, grayness, and grayness again, glass and metal. Life again. I can breathe now. I can breathe because of, not because of the architect, in spite of the architects. I can breathe because of these people who brought whatever they had. And you see so much color. Why is it that these people also didn't bring gray furniture, metallic furniture, and so on? Why? Because they are alive, because they are normal people, because they love color. That's why, as opposed to the sophisticated Pritzker Prize laureates. Yeah, so you understand the facade of the building, the existing building was here. So they added this layer, so to speak, in front of the facade of the building. So they managed to bring back the, well, it's not a greenhouse, but it's that additional space, which of course distances the rooms from the exterior, but this space could be in a way interesting because yes, you can even put a ping pong table here, I guess, or whatever. Otherwise, welcome to the gray Pritzker. Gray, grayer than the clouds. But as opposed to the clouds, the lines of this gray architecture are straight and they have no hesitations. They don't want to become curved or capriciously curved. No. Now you imagine, to bring this loggia and the balcony, kind of, I don't see the dimension here, but it's not a little thing. It was an effort, a financial and maybe engineering or structural effort as well. Anyway, it was done. Was it a great improvement? I let you decide. So what they did, they removed the existing facade of the building and they brought in the grayish addition. This is 3 meters wide. It's not so little. 1 meter, the balcony and jardin d'hiver. The jardin d'hiver, which in the summer becomes something else. The melting pot of the summer. 2 meters wide. They love those. What can we do? They just love those. They love greenhouses. That's it. So happy birthday, Anne Lacaton. And let's see who is here.